What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Rowan, and today I actually want to bring you a short little video on how I use Kodak Colorplus 200 to shoot portraits. So the main reason why I've actually wanted to make this video is because I've been using Kodak Colorplus 200 film quite a lot, especially to shoot portraits. It seems to be something that comes up quite a lot when I post a photograph or I share a photo on Instagram or on a Facebook group or on Reddit. A lot of people seem to be taken back or seem to be a little bit surprised or a little bit intrigued why I actually use Kodak Colorplus and how I get the colors that I get, how I get the style that I get out of it, how I achieve the look that I get out of Kodak Colorplus. I think the reason I get asked about shooting Colorplus a lot is the fact that Kodak Colorplus is not really a film that is associated with shooting portraits. It's more of a cheap consumer style film, which is not on the same level as, say, for instance, the Portra 400 or Portra 160 from Kodak or Pro 400H from Fujifilm. It's basically not a very common or popular choice among people that shoot portraits, especially people that shoot serious portraits or that take their portrait photography quite seriously. But the funny thing with Kodak Colorplus 200 is actually a film that I stumbled upon by accident or just by chance. It was a couple of years ago. I was on a road trip with my wife back from Swaziland, and we were driving through and stayed over in Port Elizabeth, and then in Port Elizabeth we took the day out to go to Jeffreys Bay, which is a small little surfing town. And while we were in Jeffreys Bay, I went into a camera shop to buy some more film because I was running out of the film I was using at the time. I can't remember, but I came across Kodak Colorplus 200, which I had never heard of before, and it was quite affordable, or it was quite cheaper than even, say, something like Fuji Superior 200, which was a popular option at the cheap level for film. And I thought to myself, I'd never heard of this, and give it a shot and see what it's like. And I bought, at the time they were selling it in, I think it was a three pack box, so a box with 336 exposure rolls inside it. And I bought the film and I loaded it into a Canon AE1 at the time, and I shot the rest of our trip using that film. I was shooting just basically landscapes and all that stuff, and then I got back to Cape Town and I sent the film away, and it got processed and it came back and I scanned it, and I really wasn't happy with it, mainly because I realize now it is because the scanner I was using was quite faulty, and it was just, and also my Canon AE1 on the lens that I was using, it had a stuck aperture, so the aperture was stuck, and I didn't realize this till later on, after I had shot quite a bit of film through that AE1. So the colors and the exposures were never really nice, and I just instantly had a bad feeling about this film. So I had one more roll remaining from that 3-box set, and I just put it in the fridge, and I said I thought to myself I'd use it at some later stage. And a couple of months down the line, a friend of mine inherited a camera, and in that camera, it was a film camera, and in that camera there was 5 rolls of Kodak Colorplus 200, and he gave it to me, and he kept the camera and gave me the film. He was not really into shooting film, gave me the rolls, and I kept them in the fridge, and I just never looked at them again. It was only after probably 3-4 months down the line I went on a portrait shoot, and I didn't have any film, so I just grabbed a roll of those, and I was basically shooting digital, but I just wanted to shoot a bit of film, and I shot the roll and sent it away and came back, and I was insanely impressed. Like, the film, the colors were so good, the film was quite sharp, the contrast was punchy. It just so from there on I just used the rest of the rolls, and every time I used Kodak Colorplus it just actually looked very, very, very nice, and I just from there on started using it more and more, and then it became more and more available in local shops, and I just slowly leaned towards it because it was quite affordable and it was readily available, and I was liking the results I was getting from it. So I'm going to quickly go through the things that I like about Kodak Colorplus 200, and then I'm going to quickly go through things that I don't like about Colorplus 200. Of course, there are some drawbacks to it, and then finally I'll give you probably a couple of tips on how I think is the best way to achieve optimum results using Colorplus 200, especially when it comes to shooting portraits. So the first thing that I like about Kodak Colorplus 200 is its colors. It's got these warm, natural tones that it gives. It seems to always have a partially orange tint. I don't know if it's the scanner that my scanner uses, but I always find that it leans more towards a very warm, orangey, reddish tint, which I actually really like for especially portraits, because I think it is quite a bit flattering. It balances out well on skin tones, and I just really like it, especially when you shoot golden hour or late afternoon. I feel that the natural orange tints enhances the golden tones quite a bit, or it enhances the warm tones quite nicely, especially at that time of the day. And secondly, it's just the price. You know, Kodak Colorplus 200 is so cheap, or at least down here it is. Basically, putting it into perspective, it is for the price of one roll of Kodak Portra 400, I can buy 4 or 5, depending on the deal, rolls of Kodak Colorplus 200, which is fantastic. I like Kodak Portra 400, but I honestly feel that especially if you're doing a lot of personal work, it can get pricey very quickly, and I'd rather use Kodak Colorplus 200, and I've really enjoyed it. And the times that I've actually have used Portra 400, I've got decent results, but I've never been like blown away and felt that I always have to shoot on Portra 400. Look, if I'm doing work for a client and the budget for the film covers that, I'm probably going to go with Portra 400, because you know, it's just a much more consistent, nicer, pleasant film to work with. Thirdly, I also like the fact that Kodak Colorplus 200 is very versatile. It is all-round film, so you can use it to shoot a lot of portraits. You can use it to shoot landscapes. You can use it to shoot all sorts of things, and I find that it just balances out, or it's just got the right amount of versatility within it that it favors quite a lot of subjects, which is quite cool. And then I just also like the fact that it is very readily available, especially in South Africa, where I'm from. Not a lot of places stock up on lots of film. A lot of places have just your common, you know, Superior 4 200 or whatever, and then they have the Portra or the Ilford, whatever. But with Kodak Colorplus 200, I found that most camera shops that I go to will have stock of Colorplus 200, which is quite ideal. The other thing that I really like about Kodak Colorplus 200 is the fact that it's an unpopular choice, which means not a lot of people actually use it for portraits, which is ideal, because at the end of the day you end up making a lot of work that is not identical to, say, every other photographer that shoots portrait. I'm not saying that everybody's work is the same, but the colors will always be sort of standard amongst portrait or Pro 400H, so you kind of know that this person is shot on portrait. And Kodak Colorplus, I like the fact that it's an unpopular choice, so your work will always seem to be different compared to the large river of people actually shooting portrait and whatever, which is, I think, because it's an unpopular choice, is a cool way to be different as an artist. And then, as much as I like Kodak Colorplus 200, there are a couple of things that I actually don't like about it, and I'm going to mention the two most things that I find always get to me. Is, I have to admit, Kodak Colorplus 200 is so inconsistent when it comes to especially the blues in photos. So if you've got a lot of sky, if you've got a lot, I don't know what it is, but I've always found that the hue in the blues, or the color shift in any photo that has a lot of blue, will be very inconsistent. So you'll have two photos that have got a similar sort of sky, and the one has got seriously light colored blue, and then the other one will have like seriously washed out colored blue. Some will have a very dark, deep blue. And I've always found, even on the same roll, same conditions, I've always found that the inconsistency in the blues can be a bit of an issue. You can sort it out in post, but I just feel that the inconsistency in Kodak Colorplus's blue tones is very much a thing that I don't like about it. I also don't like the fact that it is one of the most unforgiving color films out there. By that I mean it does not handle exposure or dynamic range very well. By that I mean I find that when you overexpose Kodak Colorplus 200 by even a stop and a half, the color shift is drastic. Like you'll get some, if you nail the exposure on Colorplus 200, the exposure is so, the colors are so nice. But once you overexpose it, or once you start pushing its limits when it comes to exposure, I find that the colors fall apart so quickly. The color shift goes from a nice warm color to a really horrid washed out color that I really don't like. So if you do accidentally overexpose it, which I've done a couple of times, I shot a full roll at ISO 100, and I also, because I shoot mainly in aperture priority, so I also had exposure compensation on plus 0.7, so there was almost 2 stops that I overexposed, and with most film that is normally fine. But I found that every time I have accidentally overexposed Colorplus, or I have actually had some shots that are overexposed in Colorplus, it does not handle the color shift very well, which is quite a bad thing, considering a lot of film will actually handle overexposure quite effortlessly. And then finally, to end off, my tips to get the best results, I believe, for shooting portraits with Colorplus 200 is, one, I'd say shoot it at box speed. You know, a lot of photographers have a tendency of wanting to overexpose or wanting to underexpose, push film, whatever. And just my advice probably would be to shoot it at box speed, get it processed at box speed. I find I get the best colors from that. Don't overexpose it, don't underexpose it, just shoot it straight up at box speed, and I think you'll be good. So Kodak Colorplus being very consumer level film, I think it is always best to shoot it in well-lit scenarios. Shoot it in, like I always shoot it in basically direct sunlight or in a shaded area, but that has a lot of light bouncing back into the scene, a lot of light coming in from all different sources. But I find that it really shines best when it is in direct sunlight, or you have given it a lot of light. Once you start putting it in very tricky conditions where it is, you know, you've got artificial light, you've got not much natural light, it really isn't the most ideal film to use there, because as I previously mentioned, the color shift on Colorplus 200 really goes from looking good to does not look usable at all. And finally, because it's an ISO 200 film, don't bother with things like trying to shoot portraits at night or late when the sun has gone down. It just doesn't, it's not designed for that. If you want to be shooting portraits at night or want to be shooting portraits in very dimly lit situations, it's best to use at least an ISO 800 film. You can try use a 400, but I feel ISO 800. And so Kodak Colorplus 200 is, because basically this is as I said, this is a consumer level film. It's not really designed to, you know, be pushed and pulled and pushed to its limit. Just because it's such a consumer level film, it's just best to shoot it for what it is ideally meant to shoot. Yeah, and finally, I think to get the best results from it would also be to use, like I use this Canon EOS 5 camera, which is nice because it takes a lot of modern lenses, which I kind of know are going to give me very contrasty and sharp images. And also the EOS cameras from Canon have got very reliable light meters, so I know if I use for instance like a center weighted metering system, I know I'm going to nail my exposure most of the time for my portraits. And it's much more easier than, for instance, say I use an SLR or an older rangefinder camera where I'm gambling a bit on the camera's inbuilt light meter or using an external light meter, which is, so I would suggest if you shoot portraits with Colorplus 200, use a camera with quite a reliable light meter. So for instance, if you're on the Nikon system, you've got Nikon F cameras. If you're on Canon, you've got the Canon EOS cameras, which are nice because you can all use your modern Nikon and Canon lenses and stuff like that. But yeah, I'd say use a camera with a very reliable light meter. So if you shoot a lot of portraits using Kodak Colorplus 200, I'd really like to see some of your work. I'd really like to interact with some of you guys that shoot portraits using Kodak Colorplus 200. Best way would be to interact via Instagram. The link will be in the description. And in the future, if you do shoot Kodak Colorplus portraits, I'd really like to see your results. You're more than likely to tag me on Instagram, and I'd like to interact with you guys. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and give me a comment down below. Let me know what your favorite budget film is, what you think of Kodak Colorplus 200. And as always, thank you for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one.